you short of Dane. We're waiting on you. We're waiting for you. Can you get a move?
Of course. So, welcome to Tranche 2 of the District Plan, or the return of the District Plan. We're not quite sure on what the subtitle will be. So, Son of District Plan. Okay. Daughter. Right. So the District Plan is the city's major planning document which sets out who can build what where. It contains most of the city's planning regulations, and you decided the first half of it last year with Minister Bishop. This is the second half, and this is going to take place under a different process. So what we're going to do is outline what that process is. I'm going to have some of my officers your officers take you through the particular topic areas, and then over this series of briefings we'll also cover how amendments get made and also go through any questions you have on your roles as decision makers. Your roles as decision makers are different to the last time you did the district plan, so you will excuse me if I belabor the point to begin with, but it is important to understand that whilst you're again sitting in a quasi-judicial role, the pathway that your decisions will follow will be different this time to last time. So what we're going to do is run through what this decision is, how it's different from last time, what happens to recommendations that you do not approve, what the different topics are, and then the next steps and how your planners can support you through this process. So, what are we going to decide? So on the 12th of June, the Council will make decisions on hearing streams 6 to 11 of the proposed district plan. The decisions will be informed by the Independent Hearings Panel recommendations, and they are the final decisions you will make during this proposed district planning process. One thing that will be different to last time is you won't be examining the independent hearings panelists the way you did last time. So we have returned back to the first schedule of the RMA, or the traditional process that many of you will be used to from years past. The Council is the decision maker on these provisions. The Minister is not involved, and so your decision is the one that is binding. And the output from this decision will be that the district plan will be amended. The appeals on decisions will open for 30 days after the decisions have been publicly notified, and the plan will become operative after that appeal period is completed. And at that point, it will all be operationalised into the consent processes. So if we were to compare the processes, the one that you're going to be going through is the one at the top. So you have the choice to accept the recommendations or to not accept them. If you don't accept them, they can go through various pathways, but generally it involves rehearing and reconsidering that part of the plan. Though we'll advise you particularly on different parts of the plan as we go through, because some of them have different pathways. What will happen is, during this process, you'll be considering what the IHP has heard and what submitters have put before it. The Council will consider all the recommendations of the Independent Hearings Panel, and then you will use the ability that you have retained to either approve them or disapprove of them. Disapproving with recommendations should be approached with caution. And the reason for that is there are a whole lot of conditions that must be met in order for you to follow different pathways. So what we will do is, as you encounter things that you may not like or you may want more information on, we will look to provide you with the information you need to understand whether those conditions are met and how you might follow those pathways. It's a bit difficult to do that proactively, just given the sheer quantity of material in front of you. In coming to your own view, the Council needs to put itself in a similar position to the Independent Hearings Panel. So you need to consider submissions on on the different aspects. You need to review the hearing footage if it is an area that you are particularly looking to amend or change or reject. You need to consider the evidence that was presented in the hearings, both for and against the position that you wish to alter. And if necessary, you may need to undertake further evaluation required under the Act. And again, we can help you with that. We're here to help you, and we can work our way through this process depending on the priorities that you set us. On the board this time are the different topic areas for consideration. So for the most part, the zones of the city, so the residential rules, the commercial rules, were decided last time. These topics tend to cover more specialist areas, so things like what happens in the city's open spaces, how we deal with particular types of activity, so things like light, and how we deal with the instruments of other authorities within the planning system, so things like designations. Designations we will do last and we will do separately because the RMA is quite different for dealing with requiring authorities and designations to the rest of the plan. And so, just to remind you of where we've been, last March you made decisions on that first tranche. Those decisions were then decided by the Minister in May, and the district plan provisions for the first half of the district plan were then made operative and have been underpinning the consent process since then. Where we will go now is you'll be briefed over the next couple of months on streams 6 to 11. On the 12th of June, you will make your decisions, and then in early July, we will notify that decision. The new rules will take legal effect, and the appeal periods will begin, and we will be working with the consent planners to then implement the operation of those rules into the day-to-day business of the city. So today, we've done the decision-making part. We're going to cover special purpose zones and development areas, and then you can see the rest of the arrangements there. The particular ones you'll be interested in, just from your previous discussions with you, will probably be designations, but also the significant natural areas, and they will come in May. In terms of who can help you, your planning officers can help you with briefings, answering your questions, and assisting in the provision of information to you. There is also legal and democratic support. So they provide, as you are aware, Democratic Services provide the meeting secretariats, which enable us to do our jobs. But there are also our legal officers who will be assisting you through the decision-making processes and ensuring that all of the considerations and conditions that you need to meet to make a decision can be met. Do we have any questions on that first part?
Councillor Wenera.
Will the Urban Papakainga chapter make an appearance in this tranche?
That was last time, wasn't it? Yes, so that has been ordered to go to plan change. That plan change process is proceeding in parallel to these decisions. So it will not be in the bundle that you're deciding in June. That will be decided at a subsequent meeting.
Okay. Of this term or next, probably?
It is extremely unlikely I'll be able to bring that before you before the election.
Sure, thank you.
Councillor Young.
Thanks, Sean. Can you just explain to me the definition of two things? One is the special purpose zones, are the special purpose zones, and the other one is designations. I haven't a clue what they are.
Very good. We'll cover both. We'll cover these topics in depth, but in short, a designation is a planning instrument that is used by a requiring authority. So what that means in English is, say you are Transpower and you need to provide for transmission lines between cities. A designation is an instrument where you can basically draw some lines on the map and punch a hole through the planning framework to let you build your transmission lines. So they're for particular purposes by particular authorities, and what they are essentially there to do is to allow for national scale infrastructure and effects to take place in local areas.
Possibly not a big issue in the Central City Ward?
Thank you, Planet. Thank you, Planet Planet. Yes, they are an issue in your ward. In particular, those designations held by the NZTA would be the ones that your community would be most interested in. They cover the state highways.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of special purpose zones, those are zones. Sorry, I was just about to say those are zones for special purposes, but that doesn't help at all. They are zones that are for a particular thing. So, for example, the airport has its own zone.
My question is those bullet points about the steps that councillors would need to take if we're to disapprove any of the IHP recommendations and come up with our own. How does that differ from the process that we went through with the first district plan? Chance.
Okay. So the key thing to understand in this process compared to last time is that this time you are the decision maker. So you were the decision maker for anything you accepted from the IHP last time, but technically what you were doing is sending a conflict to the minister to be resolved last time, and the minister was the decision maker. And you can see that through the resolution of judicial reviews on the district plan.
So those steps that we took to do an amendment are not different? That's what I'm checking, and the process around the table.
So the process around the table will be very similar.
Yep.
What will change is the content of our advice. And so what we will be doing this time is informing you of the process implications of what you might be proposing to do. So, for example, whereas last time we might say, yes, you could refer that to the minister and you will need these types of reasons, and can you advise us from the submissions what those reasons might be? This time we might be advising you that to do that would require a plan change or the rehearing of the matter. It depends on which part of the plan is being changed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Just in terms of the background information, I was wondering if you could just outline reasonably briefly what the state of the hearing panel information is at the moment if people wanted to dive into a particular issue and find, for example, where there might be a submission or the Commissioner's report. I assume the Commissioner's report will be brought forward, but further information, is that on the website, and what state is that in at the moment?
So I'll refer the question to Michael, given he's working with this every day.
Through the chair. The information is being published proactively online, and what we're doing is we'll be providing that in line or in parallel with the briefing sessions that we're giving you. So the Commissioner reports will detail decisions relative to submissions that were made. That information is all housed on the district plan page on the public website. So there will be an ability to navigate through the website to access the content should you wish to. If you have any specific questions or would like assistance with that, then the district plan team is available to assist you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I was wondering if you'd outline whether or not, if and when we make a decision on this, whether there's a different appeal process in terms of people who may disagree with our decision in this phase of things.
So the difference in appeal process to say what we experienced last time. So previously you were protected from appeals on some provisions because the minister was the substantive decision maker, and so they were only open to judicial review. These decisions will be appealable to the Environment Court, so they can be appealed on matters of substance as well.
Okay, thank you. And the last thing is, and with respect to the district plan change that is running in parallel, that was mentioned, I was wondering if the next briefing could maybe give us a little more detail on the expected time frame for that, because I know that you're not sure, but I was wondering if you could maybe firm up a little bit about what you hope to have happen with the district plan change that's running parallel to this process.
Yes, we can bring a briefing, probably not to the next one, but the one after.
Yeah, well, I was more thinking not so much of a briefing, but maybe at least a time frame for what is reasonable. I don't want you to have to bring stuff to us that's not ready. I just want to know when you would hope it would be ready in terms, because we've got to work around things like the annual long-term plan, and of course there's an election in October. So just in terms of your expected time frame as officers, I just think that would be helpful.
Yes, what I'll do is add a part to the next presentation that just details what the other planning instruments that are in play are and what the current state of play with them all is.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much. I had a meeting with Wellington Electricity last week, and he was telling me that a problem with the way we actually plan things is sometimes that we decide where transformers should actually go or what particular industry should go in any particular area. So do our special zones actually allocate these areas where we want to do these things, or do we actually discuss these things with whoever may be using it later?
We don't plan the transformer network. The electricity authorities do that.
Yes, but what he's saying is that we seem to allocate certain areas and special zones where we think that should actually go, whereas when they come in and they need to put a transformer in somewhere, quite often it's actually not in that area, it's somewhere else. So how do we actually plan these special areas to get around that, or do we actually need to work with them before we actually allocate areas for them?
So what normally happens is we will plan the various densities of the city and the activities that can take place in each place, and then what happens is that is then packaged up through a housing and business assessment and provided to the utilities, which tells them where they can expect demand, and from there they plan their networks, and they will then use normally a national policy statement or a resource consent process to then put a transformer or a telephone transmission tower, whatever it is, into that area to meet that anticipated demand. It can cause difficulties when you have out-of-sequence developments take place, so something you didn't predict happens, but that's generally on their network planning. We don't tell them where to put the electricity. They respond to the demographics and the development information we give them about the city.
Councillor Rodero. With a mouthful of food.
Excuse me.
It's bad timing. Sorry about that.
Will the panel, the IHP, be the same in terms of personnel?
Yes, it was a single combined independent hearings panel that heard both tranches. The only difference was Commissioner Pomade, which Commissioner Pomade replaced Commissioner Faulkner partway through the hearings process.
No further questions.
Very good. We shall move to the next piece, which is hearing stream 6. So these are the special purpose zones and the development areas. And who is going to be presenting this? And Hannah will be presenting this.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can hear and see me. My name's Hannah Van Haren. I'm a Senior Planning Advisor in the District Plan team. Apologies for not being there in person, but I'm here to take you through some of the Hearing Stream 6 topics along with my colleague Joe Jeffries. So we're looking at quite a few of the special purpose zones, so Quarry, Stadium, Port, Corrections, Airport and the Future Urban Zone, as well as our 2 greenfield development areas, Lincolnshire Farm and Upper Stebbings and Glenside West. Next slide, please. So to kick things off, we've got the Quarry Zone. The Quarry Zone applies to Kiwi Point Quarry and Horu Kiwi Quarry. The purpose of the zone is to enable the continued use and operation of Wellington's large-scale quarries. There were 40 submissions and 6 further submissions on this topic, and the IHP, or the Independent Hearings Panel, recommended no changes to the quarry zone chapter provisions itself. Next slide. But within the quarry zone, we have, there was one notified precinct, the Kiwi Point Quarry Precinct, which is in Ngauaronga Gorge. This was zoned a mix of business 2 and open space in the 2000 district plan. The precinct provisions detail specific requirements, such as a quarry management plan and site rehabilitation, and the IHP recommended no changes to this precinct. So for the panel recommendations for the quarry zone, throughout the hearings process, Horukiwi quarries sought that land adjacent to their existing quarry operation be rezoned to the quarry zone. So the areas they sought are circled there in the white circles. The IHP agreed in part with the rezoning up until the first ridgeline from the coastal environment, and additionally recommended a new Horukiwi quarry precinct. And this introduced 1 new objective, 2 new policies, and 1 restricted discretionary rule for quarrying activities. So to recap, there's now a second precinct within the quarry zone, and this applies only to those areas rezoned by the IHP, again circled there in yellow. The purpose of this new precinct is to enable quarry expansion, and these areas were zoned a mix of rural zone and conservation zone in the 2000 district plan. And the new precinct provisions manage adverse effects such as traffic, noise, access, and also require a quarry management plan. I'm happy to take questions as we go topic by topic, or if you prefer to hold your questions till the end. Is there any preference?
We'll go for the end.
Okay. So moving on to the stadium zone. So the stadium zone applies only to the Wellington Regional Stadium site, the purpose being to obviously enable stadium activities. This area was zoned central area in the 2000 district plan. There were only 9 submissions, and the IHP recommended only 1 minor amendment to this zone. Next up, we have the special purpose port zones. The port zone applies from Kaiwharawhara in the north to the Railway Inter-Island Wharf in the south. The purpose of the zone being to enable operational port activities and the continued safe and efficient operation of the commercial port. So this area was zoned central area in the 2000 district plan. There were 138 submissions and 34 further submissions. And to the port zone chapter itself, the IHP recommended only minor touch-up amendments. Within the port zone, we have 2 precincts. So we have the Inner Harbour Port Precinct, or the IHPP in the south. The purpose of the IHPP is to provide for the long-term vision of the area for a vibrant, integrated, mixed-use environment. And this precinct reflects the port redevelopment area that was in the 2000 district plan. We also have the Multi-User Ferry Precinct, or the MUFP, and the purpose of this precinct is to enable the potential reconfiguration of the Cook Strait ferry operations. And then we also have Appendix 10, which sets out the requirements for redevelopment of these precincts. So in terms of the panel recommendations, we have, they've recommended new policy clauses about responding to the coastal marine area, as well as responding to the Kaiwharawhara stream and estuary. They've also recommended clarification that the permitted activity passenger port building rule applies only to existing operators, being Bluebridge and Inter-Islander. Within the IHPP, they've recommended a new permitted office activities ground floor area rule be increased from 2,000 metres squared to 10,000 metres squared. And also in the IHPP, there's a new permitted activity rule for minor additions and alterations in buildings less than 100 metres squared. And just to note that the port zone reflects and aligns with Centreport's vision for those areas. Handing over to Joe.
Sorry, do we have any questions on the port zones? We can close it off. So we've got Hannah to answer. Thank you.
Do we want to do questions as we go along?
Yep.
Okay, we'll do a few questions now. So Deputy Mayor Fern.
Mine was just asking about the landfill. So is that a special purpose zone, or is it a designation, or should we take that up offline?
From memory, it is a designation, but I'll provide you with a written answer.
Yeah, that'd
afterwards.
be great. Yeah, and just Kerry's Gully, like what is that designated as?
Very good. We'll provide you a map with our written answer.
Thank you.
Councillor Pennant.
If I could just ask questions about the quarry and I'll come back on the list. Where do I start? I might need an offline discussion with you. And given that the RMA is about the environment, what consideration did the commissioners give to environmental protection from quarrying?
So the reasoning of the commissioners can be seen in their reports, and a number of submitters submitted on the impact of quarrying on the environment. In the main, those submissions concentrated on terrestrial effects like biodiversity rather than necessarily the climate effects.
So did they make any recommendations?
They did, and Hannah, can you speak to the recommendations of the commissioners on the quarry to do with environmental effects?
Yeah, sure. So within the new Hotokiwi Quarry precinct, there are provisions that seek to manage adverse effects. So there are standards in there that require the development of a quarry management plan and also site rehabilitation. So both of those would include the discretion of council to consider those environmental effects through those plans.
And actually, I'm not so interested in climate this time. What I'm interested in is renewable resources. So we've known for a long time that this quarry will run out. So, which is, a bit crazy for us not to have a backup plan, and it's difficult to consent another quarry. So, has the commissioners given any consideration to that issue? Because someone must have raised that. I just want to hope so.
I'm happy to answer that one.
Yes, Hannah.
So again, the new Hotokiwi Quarry precinct, where the panel have recommended the rezoning on the land adjacent to where the notified quarry is. The key reason for the recommendation for rezoning that is to enable the expansion of quarrying activities into areas that are not currently being quarried. So they've considered that there is a indefinite supply in the existing quarry, and they've looked to rezone to ensure there is that expansion.
So just one last question. Indefinite supply, how did they calculate that?
Potentially a poor choice of words from me there, but they do have reports provided by Hotokiwi Quarries as to the volume and quality of the aggregate that is available at the site.
Yes, sorry. What Hannah's not saying that there is an indefinite supply as in an infinite quantity of rock. But I have raised the matter with the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee, and regional reports on aggregate supply are being completed through that body, looking at what is the long-term supply of aggregate into our economy.
Councillor Young.
Just about the stadium zone, what is the extent? Where does it start and stop?
So it covers largely the area by the stadium and a bit of the concourse. Zones are a form of space-based index, and so use them the same way you would an index in a book. You just look at the colour and it tells you which set of rules are there. The reason that's important is those rules outline the different construction and operational regime that the planning and system places on it, so the ability to hold events, that kind of thing.
I mean, the reason I'm asking is just that in Hobson Street there was a change in the parking regime or requirements or regulations because of the expected increase in cars coming to stadium events, which never happened, but those parking restrictions are still in place. So if, for example, I went down to have dinner with friends of mine in Hobson Street, I can only park there for 2 hours, even on a Saturday night or a Sunday evening, because they've got these stadium hours. Is that covered by the stadium zone thing?
No, those rules are covered under traffic resolution and is the purview of the Regs Committee.
Okay, thank you. So then the second question refers to the Port Zone precinct. So is that the precincts where those buildings were demolished after, that's the multi-purpose, multi-use, whatever. Is that where the buildings were demolished?
Yes,
In the Inner Harbour Port precinct.
I'm sorry?
The
Inner Port, okay.
Yeah, those buildings are covered by the IHPP, the Inner Harbour Port
So
Precinct.
are we still planning to build there again?
So these zones allow for building to take place in accordance with the Centre Port and Master Plan, but they are not plans by the city to build.
Yes, my question is about the port zone, and I was wondering when it came to the ferry terminal zone, whether you could explain what was the assumption in terms of future land need that was made when the zone was established. So whether did it include the need for extra space that was possibly required when the new ferries were going to arise, or does it not include that? And if it does include the new ferries, was that under the previous government's proposal, or was it just like a guesstimate?
Hannah?
So throughout the drafting of these chapters, the council was in discussion with Centre Port as to their plans and long-term vision for the multi-user ferry precinct. The chapter and the provisions were drafted with the IREX project in mind, so the reconfiguration of that area to enable larger ferries. Obviously, that is a bit up in the air still at the moment, but it is still Centre Port's long-term vision that that area is still redeveloped as a multi-user ferry precinct, and so the district plan continues to align with that vision.
Just for some support and clarity there, so I was on the steering group for the multi-user ferry precinct, and the Inner Harbour precinct and the Kaifara for Knoll are inextricably connected. What they want to do is hub all of the ferries in the Knoll area, the rail-enabled area, and allow the Inner Harbour precinct to be redeveloped. But taking Councillor Young's point that the ground is dubious, it is their ground and they can do with it what they want. But so that's the clarity around shifting that activity from the Inner Harbour so they can free it up to mixed use and concentrating a multi-user ferry precinct at the Knoll.
Councillor Wadera.
What was the content of the policy clauses relating to the Kaiwharawhara estuary/marine reserve? What specifically were the panel worried about?
The amendment to that policy clause is during the redevelopment of those two precincts, that consideration is given to responding, that the buildings and design and layout respond to the site context, including giving that recognition to the coastal marine area and Kaiwharawhara stream.
Thank you.
Councillor Free.
Yeah, look, I'm really sorry that I don't know more about this process, but when you said that the hearings panel recommended amendments, what type of amendments were they recommending? Was it to the actual area that was being designated or proposed to be designated, or were there other kinds of amendments? And how would we get more information about that?
So those are all covered in detail in the hearings reports, and I believe we're also making up map viewers so you can see the spatial amendments. What we're doing through these briefings is highlighting the major amendments in each zone to both the size of the zone, so the maps we've been showing you, and the policy amendments. In these briefings, we haven't included the very small amendments to the structure of sentences within the regulations, but they're all available through the hearings reports.
Which I presume are online somewhere. I'll ask you afterwards. Thank you.
Councillor Paddock.
Just following on from the question from Councillor Young, obviously I at this time am interested in climate change. So have the commissioners taken the latest science to consider what the effect of sea level rise would be around building around there? I presume so, but, double checking.
Hannah, does particularly the port precinct areas, do they cover sea level rise assumptions?
So there was no submissions on that matter, so the panel hasn't considered it, but there are, in the notified chapter, there are policies which speak to ensuring that the port has resilient buildings. And they would work in conjunction with policies in the coastal environment chapter.
Hannah, can I just clarify? So the commissioners can sort of recommend whatever they want, though, even to make sure it's consistent with other policy and law, even if there isn't a submitter?
Yes, the commissioners can take into account policy and law, and particularly things like national policy statements and instruments from the government.
Councillor Matthews.
Shauna, I'm interested in this and in all sections, with any instances where the IHP recommendations deviate or conflict with the advice given by our team. So I'm not sure if there are any in this case, but I'm wondering if that could be part of the presentations going forward, because that's a piece of information I'm very interested in.
Yes, what I will do is I'll signal to you where that has taken place, but I won't have those officers give advice on their positions. The reason for that is I do not wish to advantage their point of view over submitters which can't be accorded the same privilege in your considerations.
That's all the questions.
Good. Take it away, Joe.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name's Joe Jeffries. I was the reporting officer for the corrections zone and airport zone special purpose topics. So I'll first go through the corrections zone. This zone applies to a single site in Wellington. That's the Arohata Women's Prison. Its purpose is to enable the ongoing operation and development of the prison. It works in conjunction with the designation, so that designation provides for the prison operations, and the zone also provides for activities that cannot be carried out under the prison designation. So it was zoned rural in the 2000 district plan, so it now has a special purpose zone. There were 13 submission points. Most of those were from the Department of Corrections. There was not a lot that was in contention for this topic. And the IHP recommended no amendments to the notified version. So I'll move on to the airport zone, unless anyone has any questions about the corrections. I can do it after or now. So the airport zone, it applies to land owned by the airport. Its purpose is to recognise and protect airport operations. It also works in conjunction with the airport's designations, and it reflects changes to the airport extent since the 2000 district plan. So the airport recently designated their operations here, so that provides for most of their operations. But there are other matters that are not covered by the designation and that are covered under the airport zone. One of those is that the extent of the designations is slightly different to the airport zone. So the airport owns land that's not designated. There's also activities that are carried out in the airport by third parties, so they don't have access to the powers of the designation. And there are also activities that are not related to airport purposes provided for by the zone. So there were 244 submission points. There were a number of submitters, including the airport itself were a very active submitter. So the panel recommended a number of changes. The first major change was to change the precincts to specific control areas. it's mainly just a change to the naming convention, so that these are sub-areas within the precinct that have different provisions applying. They introduced a new specific control area to the Bridge Street area, and that introduces a 7-metre height limit. So that area did not have any specific provisions applying to it in the notified version. And finally, the panel also recommended a number of changes to the provisions for clarity, for greater consistency with the wider plan, and to clarify the relationship with the designations, and also to remove unnecessary duplication. So there were quite extensive changes, but they weren't extensive in substance. They were mainly cleaning things up and clarifying things. So thank you.
The prison, first of all, don't have a great love for them. Would we be able to restrict the footprint by amendment? No, that's a serious question. No.
So we could work with you on an amendment to the extent of the zone. The thing we will have to work through with you is the powers that are allowed by the zone versus the powers that are allowed by the designation. So you can do things about the zone, you can't do things about the designation.
Except by appeal?
Possibly. I'll have to take advice on that myself.
I would have thought so, yeah, okay. The airport, Sean, you'll remember that I brought a nom. Still scarred by that, to try and restrict the scope of the airport to stop its expansion. Would this be an appropriate place to try and limit that again, or is that impossible now that they've zoned the golf course?
So what you would be looking to do is to create an amendment which restricted the extent of the airport zone to a smaller one than has been recommended by the IHP. Okay. I'll ask a planner to help us with that.
Okay, but legally I can do that.
Well, that's what we'll work out.
Okay, right, thank you.
Very good. Hannah, are you taking us through the future urban zone and development areas?
I am.
Excellent.
So we have the future urban zone, or the fuzz, and we have 2 development areas, being the 2 greenfield areas, Dev 2 and Dev 3. Just to note, we don't have Dev 1 included in this because that was part of Tranche 1 and is the Kilburnie bus barns. So the entirety of the fuzz is identified by the red outline on your screen. The full extent of the fuzz is overlaid by the development areas, being Dev 2 or Lincolnshire Farm, located to the east of the State Highway, and Dev 3, Upper Stebbings and Glenside West, located to the west. The district planning maps establish and identify development plans for these 2 greenfield development areas, which operate as structure plans and are supported by detailed requirements for open space and road connections, etc., which are set out in Appendix 12 and 13 respectively. So the purpose of the future urban zone is to act as a holding zone to enable urban development to occur in an integrated and cohesive manner in the future. Upper Stebbings and Glenside West was zoned rural in the 2000 district plan, and Lincolnshire Farm was zoned urban development area. There were 201 submissions and 33 further submissions on these areas. Moving on to the panel recommendations, quite a big one here. We have the deletion of the future urban zone in its entirety and the upzoning or live zoning of the fuzz based on the underlying development area structure plan to medium density residential, natural open space, general industrial zone, etc. So to step you through what that looks like in the planning maps, we have on the left, we have the notified Lincolnshire Farm, which is just kind of the grey area. And the recommendation is that that be live zoned or upzoned to what the development area planning map showed that. So we've got the yellow medium density residential, a small pocket of local centre zone in the centre with general industrial zone in the purple and some natural open space zones as well. Similarly for Dev 3 on the next slide, it goes from the notified grey special purpose future urban zone to the recommendation which is to live zone it. So we've got medium density residential zone surrounded by the natural open space zone with small pockets of open space and large lot residential as well. So panel recommendations for the development areas. So just to note that the IHP recommendations are based on a joint witness statement between the council and the landowners planners. So there's quite a bit of agreement between the parties as to what's being recommended here. The IHP recommended a new policy in each development area to allow for flexibility of development area boundaries. There's also a new rule in each of the development areas which requires development to be in accordance with the planning maps and the appendices, and also minor tweaks to internal development area zone boundaries to reflect on the groundworks and consenting that's already underway. And those minor tweaks are shown in the next 2 slides. So for Lincolnshire Farm, again notified on the left, the amendments are circled for clarity, but they're all very minor, just little changes to residential or open space kind of boundaries. And on the next slide, we have Upper Stebbings and Glenside West. So the key changes here is on the right-hand panel, there's the addition of the dark grey colour, which represents the Marshall's ridgetop area. So there's greater protection afforded for that ridge. In the yellow inset, we have in purple is showing the additional MRZ that the panel has recommended. So the medium density residential that's been recommended being added to Upper Stebbings. And then in Glenside West in the south, there is the panel's recommended amendment to the layout of that development area to reflect earthworks and engineering plans that were provided by the developer. So those are the changes to the development area maps. So continued panel recommendations, we've got, they've recommended a new objective and policy clause in Lincolnshire Farm about the connection between Granada North and Woodridge. In Dev 3, we've got more specific reference to Marshall's Ridge being recommended, and the panel's also recommended the deletion of all duplicate provisions because the live zoning now means that the underlying zone provisions are applicable. So across both those development areas, we've got the deletion of about 50 rules and 30-something standards being deleted.
Sorry, yes, we have Councillor Panner.
Thanks, Hannah. So it seemed like there wasn't much difference between the council and people like the calendars. Is that right? So are we going to actually see any significant change given how long they've held the land there?
So to answer the first part of your question, correct, there was a joint witness statement between the planner acting on behalf of the landowner and council, so a significant amount of agreement there. The provisions in these chapters enable development to occur, but it doesn't specify when that must occur, so that's in the hands of the landowner.
Public transport access for these new homes, have there been any changes as a result of the recommendations?
There's no changes in these chapters in regards to transport, no.
So with all these extra houses, will there be sufficient access?
So the structure plans do take into account future access, but it is up to the Public Transport Authority to determine the services and run them.
In the notified chapters, there are requirements for provision to bus stops, for example.
Okay, but in other words, Greater Wellington could refuse if they had financial constraints?
Yes, it is not possible to have the landowner provide the public bus service through the district plan.
No, I know that, but I'm just saying the point is, have they considered you can have the development, but if there's no way of people actually leaving the area they live, that can be a bit tricky, apart from by private car.
So yes, they have considered that you need to have those accessibility requirements in place, but again, it is ultimately up to the Public Transport Authority to run the buses and the transport.
I think, Iona, for clarity as well, so those development plans and the structure plans that sit under them have allowed for the width of arterial networks and the buses to manoeuvre through them. So the network itself has been consulted with Greater Wellington, which is what you see in the greenfield areas, but the actual provision of the service is up to them in terms of timing. Something we always talk to them about anyway, and through the Regional Land Transport Committee you often hear about their new routes that they're expanding as well, but it's something to keep an eye on.
So they haven't made any commitment so far in their discussions with you?
No, I've had no commitment from them.
Okay. And last question, just in terms of the capacity for this part of the city to take more development in terms of, the water, the ability to be able to build green stormwater controls, is that being considered?
So yes, the infrastructure loading was considered as part of the master planning process under the previous district plan, which was then rolled forward into the future urban zones, and then we've now seen that future urban zone live zoned. There will be demands on the LTP for things like additional reservoir capacity up there, but those are the costs of a growing city.
Mr. Chair, I might just add to that. A lot of the infrastructure for development in that part of the city has been self-funded by the developers, and we've entered into developer agreements with them to have a bit of a cost share arrangement. So things like water reservoirs have been provided because it's in the interest of the developer to have that infrastructure in place to roll out their development and get sales for sections. So they've used that as an approach to unlock development opportunities. But in terms of your question, Councillor Pennant, with regards to stormwater management, there's been a lot of work by the developer to work with our parks team to look at integrated development with parks and stormwater management, and there's a lot of stormwater management requirements that sit behind the planning and delivery of development in that part of the city. Probably far more than any other part of the city.
In practice, does that mean we'd see more green infrastructure?
With regards to stormwater management, yes.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
I think Councillor Pennant took most of my questions, but I guess just in terms of planning for, say, pipe infrastructure, if we weren't looking at a possible new entity, we've got a list that we couldn't fulfil over the next 10 years. So with this change, how are councils meant to work with that demand on pipes, for example?
So as Michael just outlined, a lot of the infrastructure in this part of the city is being provided through developer agreements. So it's being built by the people who are building the houses. The challenges in the northern ward in these development areas are generally quite different from the brownfields challenges you're finding in your own wards further south.
So it's cheaper, and we should put it ahead?
Well,
in terms of cost?
That's more of a decision in the LTP. What this decision in the district plan is doing is removing a consenting barrier. So rather than saying you will need to convert this land zone to a residential zone in the future, we are now saying this is a residential zone.
Right. Yeah, that's useful. Thank you. Chair, one more question. The industrial zones, like I understand there's quite a big demand for that. So I didn't quite get what was the outcome of where we've landed. So the purple bits is what I saw. So have we got more industrial zoned now?
1 second.
I think it's a further tranche, isn't it? I think the purple zone, Deputy Mayor, was the medium density.
Okay.
I'm happy to jump in and answer that. So the purple zone in the images shown is the general industrial zone. So we've essentially live zoned that. So there is now more general industrial zone. One more slide back. There is two purple areas shown. It's the purple in the centre of that image. That is the general industrial zone, the pinky purple.
Thank you.
And just an explanation on the live zone, Sean, please. Yeah.
Very good. So previously you had future urban zones. So think of those as areas for the city's expansion. And what you would have to do is then convert that zone for future expansion to a residential or a commercial or an industrial zone to do the actual expanding. What this is doing is saying that these zones are not for future expansion through the planning system. These are to be residential zones, industrial zones, and people can build on them. So it removes a barrier in the policy process.
I think it just jumps a step, Sarah, so it just accelerates it to the market faster.
Councillor McNulty.
Just an admin question firstly. The slides for this, they've not been distributed to us yet?
Yes, each week you will find these slides are uploaded to your Diligent profiles. These ones will be there somewhere.
Okay, I was trying to go through Diligent just because there's some questions that are going to arise from some further study of that map, but I don't know if I have time to find. Okay, see if Sian.
Sorry, Tian. Have I done something wrong, Tian?
All of it is in the Diligent Resource Centre, which is slightly different to Diligent Boards, which may be where there is some confusion.
Okay, I will look for that shortly, but I do have a question as well. The ridgeline protection on Marshall's Ridge, was that contrary to what we started with? I'm trying to remember, I felt like we had a policy that was no longer going to look at ridgeline protection.
Hannah?
So in the notified plan for Glenside West and Upper Stebbings and Glenside West, there are provisions in there that were notified for the protection of the Marshall's Ridge top area, which differs ever so slightly from the ridge lines overlay more broadly, which is dealt with later in Hearing Sharing 8. But adding it to the panel's recommendation to add it to these planning maps is more or less just to correct an error that ridge top was left off the planning maps by mistake.
Okay, thank you. I'll have some questions in a bit. I'm just going to try and get the resource centre.
Councillor Randall.
Yeah, so in the broad terms, how much more housing has this changed to immediately designate large areas as available for housing? How many more houses can be built in this area now, roughly?
Hannah, have you worked that out?
So the figures are set out in the 2023 Housing and Business Capacity Assessment, and that's roughly 900 to 1,000 dwellings in Upper Stebbings and Glenside West, and roughly 4,000 in Lincolnshire Farm.
Okay. In terms of, so officers and the land developer land planners did a combined submission. Were there submissions against the designations that were proposed for areas such as Glenside West and Stebbings or?
So, Hannah, were there submissions opposing these areas' inclusion in the district plan as either future urban zone or being live zoned?
There were submissions, I guess you could say, concerned as to the level of development occurring in particularly Glenside West. I don't believe there were any submissions of that nature for Lincolnshire Farm or Upper Stebbings.
Okay. And in terms of what the district plan provides in terms of protection of stormwater and support for the general Porora catchment, do these zones, in the officer's opinion, provide adequate protection to make sure that the runoff is not going to adversely affect downstream communities.
In addition to the stormwater management requirements, I guess that would flow through any subdivision consents. The other relevant factor would be the Three Waters infrastructure provisions that you made decisions on last year. So there's a stormwater neutrality type approach that is required through the district plan for development. Whether that delivers all of the environmental outcomes that might be wanted by the community for the Porirua catchment and the stream, I'm not sure. There is a lot of investment required in stormwater infrastructure in that catchment that's been identified in the infrastructure strategy for the last couple of LTPs, and there aren't currently any stormwater budgets allocated in the LTP to address that. But that will be something that the council or the new water entity will have to consider over time.
Okay. Chair, can I have one more question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, in terms of development area 3, Lincolnshire Farm area and across, has NZTA submitted on it, and how does this connect to the Petone to Granada Link Road project in terms of getting the timing right for enabling housing versus, the road getting built, or the access being built? So the NZTA did a submission and that they're aligned with this district plan?
Hannah, did the NZTA submit on Lincolnshire Farm?
I believe they did, and it was in relation to this connection between Woodridge and Granada North, not specifically in relation to the Petone Granada Link Road.
Oh. Yeah. I think one thing to just remind everybody of is that submissions were nearly 2 years ago now. So we are stuck in a little bit of a time warp, just in terms of where we are today with other projects.
I was going to cover that perhaps at the end, Tony, so it's a good point. We have only just started work with the P2G, or Petone to Granada Link. We've got an officer embedded in that series of workshops. Interestingly, it's very difficult for the officer at the moment because there's very few details. They're kind of almost putting an investment plan to the board of Waka Kotahi perhaps mid-year, but they're very, very fast reviews, design reviews that are happening. So we have a recent update from him, but there is nothing at this stage which suggests we need to make any suggested changes to the recommendations from the panel. But I suspect through the fast track process that they are proposing, is that correct, Sean? I believe they are looking to do it for P2G, that we'll hear about it very soon towards the mid-year period.
Yes. And this is where the importance of the agenda item added by Infrastructure Environment at the last committee meeting becomes important, where you've requested information from the New Zealand Transport Agency to brief you.
Okay, thanks.
So, Tony, so your NOM will bring both the State Highway Upgrade Project for the central city area, so the Terrace Tunnel and Mount Vic and the basin upgrades, and we'll also bring P2G update to you as well.
Oh, good. As long as the planning is joined up as best we can.
Trying to.
It's not easy, I know. Yeah. Thanks.
Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks very much. I just would like some clarification on the designations that you said were duplicated and have been replaced by this. Were they designations that actually allowed for development on these areas? I think I wrote down DV 12 and 13, it might have been 2 and 3. So did we actually allow, or did we actually designate development on these areas before?
Hannah, can you explain why the duplication existed?
Sure. So as was notified, we had the future urban zone with a development area sitting overlaying that, and there were 40, 50 or so rules and standards in each of those development area chapters that provided for and enabled activities to occur, including residential development. Now that the future urban zone has been deleted and we're live zoning, it now means that all of the rules and standards in the medium density chapter, the general industrial chapter, now apply because they're now the live zoning. So the deletion of these rules and standards just removes that duplication now that we've live zoned and deleted the future urban zone. So the same type of development is still enabled regardless of whether the future urban zone is there or whether it's the live zone. It's the same development that is being enabled.
Yep. Okay, that's great. Thanks. And there have been no changes between a industrial development and residential, so there's no changing of what was actually envisaged for there. Is that correct?
So Hannah, the development areas that underpinned and the structure plans that underpinned those former zones, they remain the same, don't they? They've just been translated into the zoning pattern that covers the rest of the city.
They remain the same other than for a few minor tweaks that have been circled and identified in these slides.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No further questions.
Very good. So the next briefing will be on Tuesday the 8th, and that will cover the rural and open space zones, district-wide matters, and some more special purpose zones. I do apologise. We're not the most creative when we name things, but it is for the best in the long run. One thing I will look to include also is an explanation of how zones and designations interact, because I think that might help, particularly with understanding some of the issues in the questions you've raised today.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just might also suggest, I was talking to Councillor Free, and the ward councillors applicable could meet with Joe afterwards and just go over that the airport matters, just further detail. And I think, yeah, thanks, Ina. And I think, Ben, you might have some feedback on the Granada North and Northern Growth Area stuff later. Yeah, okay. Well, we're open, as always, to questions and feedback, so...
Yeah, and I would remind you, your decisions are not until June, so you've got plenty of time
to do the reading. And
got one last question from Councillor Wadera.
I do have a general question about the next briefing, which is that the previous time we went through this for Tranche 1, if we were to change a zoning designation in sort of any regard, it would require evidence from a submitter. Does that remain the case?
Yes, any decision that you'll be making must be either relevant to what was notified or what has been submitted on. So there needs to be scope for you to make any amendment, and we can work with you if you wish to make one to help you to ensure that it's done in a lawful way.
Okay, thank you.
That's it. Thank you. It's yours.